All right, so continuing on with the despilling. So we want to attack the trouble areas. So again, I pointed out a couple. We have one around this edge, which might be a little bit tricky because it's kind of a blended color. So we'll attack that one. We'll go for the dark edges on this guy's face and the lack of detail. So sometimes your lack of detail, you'll think that, well, maybe it's your alpha that's not good. So you're going to go and you're going to check your alpha. But then you'll see that actually in your alpha, you actually have all that detail. So that means actually most of the problem is coming from a despill problem. So when we're kind of multiplying against that darker color, you don't really see anything there. So actually, it's not that your alpha doesn't have it, it's that we need to fix the despill of this area. So if I go to this green screen, I'm going to use a key light for this one because the key light is good for kind of using that screen balance to get into the edges. I'll also use a key light for this area, and you'll see why. So if I use a key light and I put 1 in the green box, that will do like a base despill for us. But if we start putting these colors negative, it will start to add color back into that area. So I can start to add a bit of that yellow color, similar to the hair we have here. I can add a little bit of blue, so it's not so yellow. And so that's pretty good for a good despill. Might need to be a little bit brighter, so we can brighten it more and brighten the blue a little bit more so it's not completely yellow. So I'm just using my arrow keys, selecting number, and pressing the down or up arrow key. In this case, down because we're negative. And so that's good. And then I'll just take a key mix and basically plug that in and put in a roto shape here. And again, I'm not worried about this. The key light is generating an alpha, but we're not worried about what that is. We're just using it for the despill because we're copying in the alpha afterwards. So we don't need to worry about anything with the alpha. And you can see I'm always brightening up to check everything. So you see I'm always using these controls to kind of look at things. So I would just get used to and comfortable with doing that if I were learning. And so I'm going to roto around here and just select that and key mix it in. And make sure to turn off my clip 2 to no clip for my roto. And so that's what we get. We get a result like this. And if we look at the end result and we turn that on and off, you see that it looks like we're getting a ton of detail back. Obviously here we need to adjust our little mat and maybe blend it. But it looks like we're getting hair detail back and we haven't even changed the alpha. So that's something pretty awesome to keep in mind. Of course, we're going to have to apply that the match move, the track. So we will apply that to the roto shape so that it sticks. But you can see, it's a pretty good result. We can actually get more detail back using another technique, which we'll talk about later with additive keying. But that's pretty good for now. One thing I noticed also is my bounding box has gotten quite large. And I think that's coming from, so if I use the 1 on my keyboard, my viewer, and I look to see where that's happening, it seems that this key mix is starting to create a really big bounding box. So I can set the bounding box to B, so to copy the bounding box from whatever's above, just so we only process what's in this frame. And that will speed up your scripts. So I usually go through and I make sure that that's not a really huge bounding box. And again, our background, the same problem. So if I go up here, I took off the crop, it looks like, because we ended up having to move the picture down here. So I'm going to place a crop just before, and that should be fine. Cool. So that's we got one of these spells looking better. So let's try this next area. So I'm going to do another key light despill. Also, I'm going to label this. And you see how I'm doing it. I'm branching it right, and then I go down, and I branch it back in. And for the key, I kind of have the main key going down. I branch right, make a key, and then put it back in. Branch right, make a key, put it back in. It's basically the opposite with a despill. You go down, make your D-spill. If you want to make a new one, you branch it right, go down, put it in. Branch right, go down, put it in. And you're always branching from the original footage. So that's why they're always going back to this point. So again, if I want to create a new D-spill for this pole thing, I'm going to put a branch here. I'm going to break it down like this, and oops, and put it here. Also just going to label these so they're really clear. So this is the hair edge detail, hair edge D-spill, and I'm going to make it a less annoying color because I don't want to contaminate my eyes with a really saturated color. So usually I just desaturate it. Same, I think yellow's probably okay, but just as a good practice not to use really saturated colors. And okay, so now we want to attack this area. So easiest way is, let's just start with the key light. Key mix. Plug it in and put a roto around the area we're trying to do. So I could put a roto there. Maybe I'll just do two shapes like this. Set the clip to no clip. Close everything. All right, so that's what we got there. So now we can watch and see what it looks like. But I'm going to go to the key light and do the same technique. So I'm going to set it to 1, and then I'm going to start setting these negative. So we got that, and then we can set this to negative and start to increase that color. And that's a pretty bright yellow compared to this edge, which is kind of more orange. So that's not completely the color we want. So we need to sort of play around with the values here. So let's just try just playing around with the numbers here. Usually you need to have the green screen set to 1 sort of to kind of get rid of the color. But if you play around with the color wheel, we can probably get something. So this is a little bit more orange. It's just too saturated. So we could just pull it towards the center. Something like that. So it's a little bit glitchy. It's using just the red and the blue in this instance because we don't want green. But something like that is probably okay. If you want a little bit more control over the color, we can use Despil matte and then just use a normal grade. Also, one thing that's kind of useful is we still have this weird green edge around, and what makes key light really great for despilling this is that we have this screen balance, so we can slide around that color. And you see, like, we have this weird, harsh, almost color fall off here, but if we screen balance it, we can fade it away, and now it just fades nicely into that color. So that's really the main benefit of using this. We also have the alpha bias, so if we use that in combination, it's pretty good for despilling. So I can select the tone of this area, if I just disable it for a moment and just select these tones. For whatever reason, it just does a really good job of like mixing the colors together. So a combination of playing around with this, getting a good base color, doesn't have to be 100%, but then you can slide it with the screen balance, and then use the alpha bias and select the color of the area you're trying to despill. And you get this like really nice fade of color. Maybe it won't work on our darker areas like I talked about earlier in the earlier lessons, but this is a pretty good point probably. So let's just see what it looks like. It might be too bright, but let's just see. And if you look over the background, okay, so it's way too bright, but the color at least is pretty good. So we can maybe just take this -6 and just make it a little bit lower, so it'll kind of darken it, and maybe make this a little bit less as well. So I can play around. Again, this is being hit directly in light, so it might actually be correct that that's what we would expect. So let's fade this off. Just gonna fade off the feather a little bit. Mostly in the dark areas is what I'm concerned about here. I think we're going to have to treat those differently, because I think in the shadow area you wouldn't have this bright edge, but I think the areas around it might be kind of okay. But I think we're going to need to do a little bit extra edge treatment here in this area. So we'll start talking about what that means. First, I'm going to label it so we can expand this a little bit further, just to keep the script nice and tidy. And I'm going to expand this down because we're going to need more despill nodes. So I'm going to expand this down a little bit. And we'll label this pillar despill. And just keep it there. And I'm gonna actually make this a little bit taller. So I'm gonna add another dot node because I'm gonna have to add some nodes after this to make those secondary corrections, because one node is not solving this whole area really. So what I'm gonna do is, it might be that we need to do two different despills here, like one for the brighter area and then kind of one for this like darker region. So I think maybe a despill mat might help us out here. So if we want to create a despill mat, again, we can just do a minus. So you minus before the color correction was applied. And you get something like this. And we can just take the whatever channel it's falling into, so the red channel, and we can shuffle this into the alpha. So we do a shuffle, put the red channel into the alpha, and then we want to correct this so it becomes white instead of gray. So if we look at the alpha, set this to RGBA or just the alpha, so we're only worried about the alpha channel. We can just put that a little bit brighter and make sure we put the white clamp so we don't go beyond 1. And that should be good. So now we're going to use that to color correct. It just gives us an easier control to color correct with, because the key light, it does a really good job at contaminating everything for a really good base result. But again, you can't really mess around with the green slider too much without sort of breaking the result. I guess actually it's working pretty well in this instance. So we could actually use it in this instance. But again, like if you really want to get specific colors, sometimes it's a little bit tricky sliding this around. It starts to break a little bit, but as a base result, it's really good. So, but anyways, I'm gonna just darken using this grade that I've created, and so that might not be the best way. Let's just play around with it. So really what we're trying to do is darken in this inner edge so that this fades off into dark. So we just need, basically we just need an alpha that kind of matches that. So maybe I could do a little bit of an erode, and we can push this despill alpha inwards and outwards. So let's try it, switch it to Gaussian. So it's kind of a soft fade in. So if I look at what I'm doing with the alpha, let me just, I'm gonna make this darker. So we have like a black and white, like very obvious, and then we could kind of erode that. Let's just back to box. And I'm gonna do the trick I did earlier where I kind of erode out to get rid of the little dots, and then I'll duplicate it and erode back in. So we can sort of get something like that, and then we can just blur it. We're just trying to get an alpha for that edge, really. So you see now that if I turn that off, you see it's doing the nice color correction, but it's not getting this blurry edge. So all we're trying to do is create an alpha that gets us into the right spot. So we have that alpha. We do a little bit of an erode just to get rid of some of the noise. So we actually wrote it out, which gets rid of the noise, and then we wrote it back in, which kind of shrinks it inwards, and then we can blur it a little bit. And you see now we're kind of darkening in that area. And let me expand that out. Expand our script here. And then also, so because we only want it on the dark area, we just put a roto and we'll mask that effect. So I'll mask it, set the roto to no clip, and then I'm going to isolate this specific area and just blur it off. So you see now we just darkened that area a little bit. If you look at it looks weird here, but if we look at the end result, I assume that that's going to help a little bit. So we can see that it's actually, maybe it's a little bit too far. I can shrink it down. And maybe just a little bit, something like that. We might need to make the alpha a little bit bigger because we see there's a slight bright edge on it. So we can adjust the alpha size here. Sort of just playing around with it. Make sure we get the exact area that we need. So this just needs to be a little bigger, I think. And then take a look at it. So that's working pretty well. It's very subtle, but you know, that area is in shadow. So we're trying to mimic that. You see all the effort, you know, just to despill that specific little spot there. But it's a pretty blurry spot. It's you know, there might have been a better way or a quicker way to do it, but usually I just am experimenting around with a basket of techniques and seeing what works and what doesn't. Sometimes I'll try something and it just won't work, and then okay, well maybe there's a better tool or I could get into that edge differently. And that's how I usually approach it. But this seems to have worked pretty well. And this was kind of, you know, I didn't plan or know that technique. It's just I know about combining techniques. So creating a despill mat, but the despill mat doesn't line up. But how do you adjust it? Well, you can use these erodes and you can grade it. So you kind of grade it to become a little bit more of a core mat. So you don't have all these weird problems. And then you're just doing these erosions to target the area you need to. So hopefully that makes sense. And then we're just mixing it back on. And we'll just take a look. So it's doing a pretty good job despilling this whole area. I'm going to just try to take that roto and add it to this area and just see how it does. So I'm just going to put a roto here. And it's doing a pretty good job. It might be, oh yeah, it's actually doing a pretty good job. That might actually work. I'm going to limit it to the bright area here. We might want to darken some areas if we think that maybe that edge isn't supposed to be as prominent, but it looks a heck of a lot better than that green. So we can go through and try to find some other green areas. Some of these areas are a little bit strange in terms of their despill. I would not want to brighten these areas too much, so we might want to treat it a little bit differently, these areas, but let's just try. Could work pretty well. I think it actually looks halfway decent. So some of these greenish areas that we might need to just do like a hue correction or something. And this thing we're going to need to do a different despill as well. But you can see that's kind of the main approach, and it's restoring those parts of the image. And it really helps with our composite in the end. But key light is really good for getting those like really, this type of weird edge where it's like faded into each other. Let's just see our hair as well. Hair's looking pretty good. We still have these two main issues, this rope and this radar, and then the greens. So those are the main three problems remaining. And we have some like holes up here as well. We need to actually add grain in our background as well, because you see that this is really grainy and our background doesn't have grain. So we're going to add grain so that matches. That will really help with our edges too. Okay, well, I'll do another video in the next video, so keep splitting it into chunks. We'll tackle this thing, and we'll tackle this dark edge. So how to deal with dark edges. There's many different ways you can approach it, but I'll show you one way. So yeah, we'll move on.